Welcome back. My name is Dave and this is Fuzzee Tutorials. Welcome to my Picta Graphic for macOS Masterclass series. This series will be divided into several chapters. I will teach you Picta Graphic from start to finish. We will cover all of the tools, how to use them, use cases, and in the final chapters we will do a couple of real-world projects from start to finish. By the time you complete this series, you should be an advanced user of this program. This first chapter is free for everyone on Udemy and my YouTube channel. The rest of the course can be found on Udemy. You will find a link below in the description. Also found in the description is a link to the course outline for the entire series so you know what will be covered in the full Masterclass series. This information can also be found on my Udemy site. You can also find many other tutorials for free on my YouTube channel, Fuzzee Tutorials. I also have other resources available on my website, such as library effects for DaVinci Resolve, templates for YouTube and Graphic, portfolios of my work, socials, reviews, a brief introduction to who we are and what services we offer. You can find our website at www.fuzzed.ca. Let's get started. Picta Graphic is a vector drawing program, so it's based on objects, which means you can expand the objects or shrink them and still maintain their sharpness. So it's actually a kind of industry standard and ideal for the printing industry. So if you're going to design business graphics and take them to a sign shop to get printed, or traditional printing business. If you were going to even go right up to a billboard, you could take any graphics you've designed in Picta Graphic and expand them up to any size you need, and they'll still retain their full sharpness. Now, why you might want to use this program instead of others that are out there, and there are a few, including some free ones, is it doesn't have a lot of extras that you don't need, and it runs very efficiently even on older hardware. Now, this software was originally developed by Autodesk, and it was called iDraw. Now, at some point, I'm not exactly sure when, they sold it off to Picta Corporation, and then it was ported over to iPad and iPhone. As far as I'm aware, the Windows version hasn't been available for a number of years, and certainly if it does still exist for Windows, it would be a much older version, probably version 2 at best, and this is currently version 3.1. Now you can find this software at www.graphic.com, or you can just go directly to the App Store and do a search for Picta Graphic. Now on their website there is actually quite a good selection of tutorials for all three platforms, with a whole bunch of projects that they take you through step by step. But it is not a video tutorial, which is why I felt this was a really good series to do. When I initially was doing some research, I discovered that the only video tutorials available for this software are quite a few years old. I think the newest I found was about 3 years old. And the best one out there was actually for the older version when it was still iDraw. Now, one of the nice things about this software, unlike the industry standard ones out there, is it's not subscription based. So it's a one-time purchase. Once you pay your $29.99 US for the Mac version, you own it forever. And you get any updates that they make for free, at least at this point anyway. And the last version update was 2018. I don't know that they really need to make any changes to it. It's pretty perfect the way it is. Let's get started showing you around the interface. So of course the first thing you would normally do when you're opening up your program is you're going to start a new project or file. So let's go up here and click on New. Now if you've never run it before, once you install it and run it for the first time, it's probably going to come up with this screen right away. So they've got a number of templates that already exist, which can kind of get you started. So now if you're doing say a logo design or something, you're probably going to want to start with the grid turned on. But let's imagine that we're doing a business card, for instance, which in North America is typically going to be 3.5 inches by 2 inches. So we're going to actually change this to inches, and then we're going to change our width to 3.5. And then we're going to change our height to 2. And if this is something that you're going to be printing out, of course, you're going to want to change your color mode to CMYK, which right now it currently is. Now this does limit some of the colors you can choose, but it ensures that what you see on the screen is what's going to appear on the printer. And then we'll just click on choose. And then to zoom into the entire canvas, we just hit Command 0, or we can go up to View and Zoom to Fit. Now some other options that you have is if you already have something sitting on your clipboard in memory, you can start a new file with that already in it. So let's just give you a quick example here. Let's take let's take this logo I redesigned or recreated. And if we want to zoom out to the actual object, then we would go Command 2. And then we can right click and copy, or the keyboard shortcut is Command C. And then we go up to File and we go New from Clipboard. And now it's created a new file with that clipboard object. And it uses the last document you created as a basis for creating the new document. Now you also have an option of creating a new document from whatever you have currently selected. So if there was something within this, if I wanted to take, let's just unpack this layer a bit here, and let's take this background shape, select that, and then I can go New from Selection, and that gives us that starting point. Okay, and some other options we have on our file menu here are opening files or open recent, and you can go into your preferences and set how many recent files you want it to keep track of. So if we want to go into preferences, you just go up to Graphic and then Preferences, and Command apostrophe will get you this as well. You can choose the color picker that you use. I kind of like to stick with the color pop-up, but you can change to the standard Mac color panel. And you can change your selection color here. When you select an object, the outline will show up in this color. But you can change that to any color you want. And you can align your strokes to the pixel grid. You can turn that off and on. If you're using this program with a device that supports haptic feedback, then you can turn these off and on. So some other options you have here, of course, are close your document or window, and you have your usual suspects of save or save as, or if you've made a bunch of changes and you just absolutely hate it, you can go revert to saved. Now this option here just gives you a place you can set your default for where everything's going to go to. So we also have the export function. which you can choose from the menu, or you can use your Option Command E. And you have all these choices here: PSD, which of course is your Photoshop document, PDF or portable document format, and your SVG, which is scalable vector graphic, and your PNG format, which is the one you're going to want to use if you want to maintain your transparency or alpha channel. And we have the old GIF or GIF, depending on what country you're from. And we have their standard JPEG, and we also have TIFF. And you've got some options here when you're exporting. You can choose the entire canvas, or you can choose all objects, but not use the canvas settings. Or if you've got something individually selected, you can export just that object by selecting that one right there, selected objects. And you can set your scale. So if you want to make this bigger in your actual export, you can determine that here. You can also make it smaller. And if you're choosing a bitmap type format, which would be the case with all of these except PDF or SVG, then you can set your image resolution. If you're going to be exporting this for use on the web, then you want to choose the standard 72 pixels per inch. For you older school people out there, then this would be 72 DPI or dots per inch. Now, if you're going to be doing something for the print shop, then you're going to want to do at least 300 DPI or pixels per inch, but I would actually recommend going 600 DPI if you're doing, say, some flyers. If you're going to be doing something higher quality, for instance, if you were going to be doing like a magazine article, or if you were going to be doing a finished wall print or something, or greeting cards of some kind, then you're going to want to go 1200 DPI. If you're looking for something that's photorealistic, then you need to save it at 2400 DPI, especially if you were bringing in a photograph that was taken at high res and you're adding some text or something on top of it or some other things, and plan on reprinting it on photo paper, then you're going to want to also save it at 2400 DPI. Now this makes for some very large file sizes. You're not going to want to do something like that in a PNG. You're going to want to choose a JPEG. But if you are going to choose a JPEG, you can also adjust your quality settings. A good option for that is actually to set it at between 95 and 97. If you're going to 1200 or 2400 DPI, you probably want to keep it down at around the 90% mark so your file sizes don't get really ridiculous. But if you really need that absolute maximum quality, then I suggest you run at least 95. And 95 to 97 will actually give you a pretty decent rate of compression without introducing any weird artifacting. And of course, if you're in the SVG format, then you have an added portion to your image scale. And here you can set it to twice the size or 4 times the size as the starting point. And you can have it convert your colors to RGB if you designed it in CMYK. It can convert your color codes, or if you designed it in HSB. But if you're sending something to a printer, then you don't want to convert that to RGB. So just something to be aware of. Okay, and another option we have is exporting layers. So where this is going to come in handy is, let's just open a business card. And zoom into that. So now this business card is in Simic, and then you'll notice here that we've got two layers. So one is for the front of the card, and then one is for the back of the card. So to make one visible and the other invisible, we've just got these little eye icons here. So that's how you switch from one to the other. Now if you're going to export this for use at the printer, then you're going to want both sides of the card. So this is a case where you would come in here and use your export layers. And you've got some choices in here. If you want them to have various sizes, use these checkboxes here, but we get back to that in a second. So your first option here is you can export each individual layer as its own document, or only the layers that you've got selected with the and any objects that you've got selected within those layers. And you've got your starting scale here, and if you use one of these checkboxes here, it's going to multiply. This one here will multiply it by 2, this one will multiply it by 3, and it'll add this extension to the file name, the @2x and @3x, and it'll start from whatever your scale setting is. So sometimes this can be useful if you're not sure if you're going to take, say, a business card and maybe later use that to add into a flyer or something like that. Or you might be designing a flyer that can be printed in various sizes. And when it comes to bitmap graphics, it's better to make it too big than too small, because you can shrink something down a little bit without affecting the quality. But if you expand it, then you can start getting jagged edges and weird artifacting. Now, in a case like a business card or maybe a flyer where you've got a front and back like we've done here, then you're going to want to include hidden layers. And you've got all the same formats you can choose from as you do in the standard export. So you've got your PNG, JPEG, GIF, TIFF, PSD, SVG, and PDF. But we'll just cancel this for now. Now if you want to directly access settings for your canvas, we would bring up your Properties tool panel, and you would choose this last one here, which is your canvas settings. And here you can adjust your sizes for width and height and your scale. So where this scale comes in handy is if you're doing technical drawings, or if you're doing like a floor plan for a house or something, then you can have it so that you're working in full scale in feet and inches, but when it prints it out, you'll be able to have your scale of, say, 1 inch per foot or something like that. And then here we can adjust our color that you're working with. So if you know you're going to be printing on a particular colored piece of paper, you can set that color here. That way you can have a feel for what it's going to actually look like when it prints out. And you've got a few other choices. You can use an image for a background or different types of gradients. Or you can set it to a transparent background. So if you're going to be using it for, say, a website, for instance, you might want to have a transparent background. And then, of course, you would export that in a PNG format to maintain that transparency. And then if we want to adjust our grid settings, you can do that here. So here you can set your X spacing and your Y spacing and your subdivisions. Now I'm going to actually get into a different document to show you this, because it's a little easier if we're in a document that's using pixels. So We're just going to close that. So here we'll go back here and we'll change this from inches to pixels. So why don't we make this say 600 by 600. And we'll leave our background as straight color. And now we can, in here, we can set our spacing. So if you're using an even number like 600, then you might want to set your spacing to 10 by 10. And then you can have 10 subdivisions. So now if we zoom out, so now we've got this option here where we can show the grid or not. We can toggle it off and on, and we can also toggle snapping to grid. Now if you're not familiar with what that does, when you've got snap to grid turned on and you're drawing something, you can have it confine you to just those points. So this makes it a lot easier to align multiple objects. So if we start drawing something here, you can see that it constrains us to those grid points. And then if we switch to our selection tool or our move tool, then when we go to move objects, it constrains us to those points. And this just makes life a lot easier when you're trying to match objects to each other. So another way we can modify our canvas size without actually having to open up that tool panel is we can go to the modify menu and canvas size, or alternatively you can use the option Command K. And now this is kind of interesting because if we wanted to change our canvas size to say high definition video, for instance, so we can go to 1920 by 1080. And now if we leave this in the center, it will just expand it from the, like it'll expand it around all the edges. But we can actually choose to keep, say, our upper left corner the same and expand it in all directions from there. So now if we zoom out, you can see our objects stayed over here. But now if we backtrack on that and we go our option Command K, and then we leave this in the center and we do the same thing, 1920 by 1080, and OK. Now you see they kept their relative positions in the middle. So this can be important if you're needing to expand your canvas and you want to keep everything relative to a particular location on your canvas. Now you've got some different options to expand an object. So if you wanted to make this a little bigger, you can just grab the corner. So you come in here until your arrow changes to that shape right there. So the double-headed arrow with the straight line. And then you can make size changes like so. If you want to constrain that to a perfect square, or actually if you want to constrain that to the same size relationship that it was, so maintaining your aspect ratio, you just hold your shift key down and then it forces you to maintain that original aspect ratio. Now, if you're drawing a new shape from scratch, so if I'm drawing a new square, if I just draw it normally, you know, I've got full control over the type of the rectangle. But if I hold my shift key down, it will constrain it to a perfect square, which can be awfully handy. And now if I want that square, instead of coming out from the corner, if I want that to come out from the center, then I would, and I want to constrain it to be a perfect square, I can hold my shift key and my option key down, and then it draws it out from the middle. So there are instances when you might want to do this. It can be especially handy when you're drawing circles. Now, if you just hold your option key down without your shift key, then you can still do a rectangle, but it still brings it out from the center. And the same will work if you're doing a rounded corner. So if we hold the shift key down, it'll maintain that perfect square aspect ratio. And if we use our option key, then it expands it from that center point, like so. Now, with circles, it's nice to be able to do that, because if you're needing to draw a hole right in the middle of something, for instance, then having that ability to not only keep it perfectly circular, but start from the center out, can really make your life a lot easier. Okay, so another option that we have is if we want to adjust the size of the artwork along with the size of the canvas, then we can choose modify an artwork size, or option command A. So if we want to change the canvas size to a specific size, we can go in here and change it to our unit of measurement here, but we'll just leave it at %, and we'll switch it to 50%. And then you'll notice that the size of the artwork stayed relative to the size change on the canvas. That can be handy. We'll just back that up. We'll undo that with our Command Z. So if you want to make some changes to the color, as long as it's not white, so if you've got any color settings of an object that's not white, then we can go into the modify menu and select color changes, or you can go to Command B to adjust your colors. And then we can come in here and it'll show you live as you make your changes. And this just gives you a little bit different type of a color interface. This is basically an HSB, or hue, saturation, brightness. Now there are other ways to change colors of an object, which we'll be going over in a different part of the tutorial in another chapter. Now, something that we haven't talked about yet is setting margins. So if we go back to our grid properties here, we can set margins. Now, something like this is going to come in handy if you're say designing a business card. So if we were to, let's create a new document here. And we're going to switch to inches, and then we're going to go 3.5 by 2. And then we can show our grid. And let's say we want spacing on our grid to be every 1/8 of an inch, which I believe is 0.125, and 125. So if we want heavier lines to mark off where your inches are, then we would set our subdivisions to 8. And if you want them a little darker, then you can up your alpha or increase your opacity. And then we can set a margin. And the reason you might want to do this, if you're sending something to an actual printer, let's say we're going to send these business cards into a printing company to produce for us, then we're going to want to put in margins so that we can create a bleed, especially if we're going to have background colors for the card that we want reproduced. Then you need to do what's called a full bleed. So in cases like that, then that's where you're going to use a margin. So typically you want to use a 1/4 inch border all the way around. So we'll go 0.25. And then we're going to extend our grid lines over the margins. And we want our margins to offset our origin, so we don't get any interior subdivisions within that margin. Now the other adjustment that you're going to need to make is you'll need to go back to your canvas, and because we've put in 1/4 inch margins, we're going to actually need to increase our canvas size by 1/2 inch each way. So now it's going to be 4 inches by 2.5. And then we'll zoom to fit. So to keep ourselves from making mistakes, we're going to create guidelines. There's a number of ways you can do that. We can take a guideline and drag it down from the ruler. And there it is at our 1/4 inch mark. And because we've got snap to grid turned on, we can get away with doing it this way. But another way we could do this is we can right click on the ruler and then click on New Guide. And then we would put it at 2 inches. Oh, sorry. It would actually be at 2 1/4 inches. So let's just drag this down. So we could do the same thing over here. We could right click, New Guide, and place it at 0.25. And we'll just drag another one out. And then we want to make sure that we've got our guideline snapping turned on. So you can do that by going to View, and you can turn your guides off and on at will without actually deleting them. So we could go in here and to View Guides and then Hide Guides. And then if we just want to toggle them back on, we can go Command semicolon, and that'll toggle them off and on. And if you hide them, then you'll no longer snap to them. But if they are visible, then whatever you're drawing will snap to them. So if we were to go in and turn off snap to grid, then if we're drawing something and we're going to move it around. It won't snap to the grid, but it will snap to those guidelines when you get close. Like so. So let's quickly draw a couple more objects here real fast. So now if we go to our alignment panel, so we can select multiple objects using the Shift key and your mouse. And then we can just change our alignment options. And then we've got middle as well. We can mirror objects. Now if you've got objects stacked on top of each other, so let's say we take this one here and let's just change the color so it makes it a little more visible. So we'll just go in here and we'll switch it to green. Let's take this one and switch it to red. So now if we want to change the order that that's in, we can go up here to Arrange. We can bring that to the front. We can send it back a level, or we can send it all the way to the back. Or you can bring forward one level. And you can do that with any individual object. And I'll show you some other ways to do that in a different chapter. So some other options that we've got to work with here is rotation. So when you have an object selected, if you get near the corner, if you go right at the corner, at the little corner point or your anchor point, you'll get this option here, which will let you resize it. But if you just get near it, you'll get this little curved double-ended arrow, and then you can rotate. And you can also constrain your rotation to 15-degree increments by holding the Shift key down. Now we can also go in after the fact and change our color space. So we can go to Modify, go to Color Settings, and then again, if this is say going to a print shop like this business card would, then we would change this to CMYK. And then you have a number of different profiles you can go with in here. So if you're going to be using a specific type of paper or a specific type of ink, then you can change those settings in here. So if you know exactly where it's going to be printed and on what, then you can make those adjustments here. But we're not going to get into exactly how this all works. That'll be for a later tutorial. And then you've got this option here of modifying colors to preserve their appearance. But we're just going to switch back to RGB. Now because this was selected, before we changed to CMYK, and that's why you saw the colors changed when we switched to a different color science or a different color space. Okay, so for now we'll just cancel that. And once again, we've got different zoom modes, so we'll just quickly go through them again here. So if you want to just step up and down one level, you can go Command, and you can either go plus to increase, or you can go minus to change it one step at a time. Command 0 is going to zoom the whole canvas, and Command 1 is going to zoom it to the actual size, and then Command 2 is going to zoom it to fit the individual object within your workspace, like so. Now you can also access these settings by going up to the View menu and then zoom to fit, actual size, or zoom into selection, or your zoom in and out. Now normally when you're doing this kind of stuff, you're really going to want to learn the shortcut keys, because that is what's going to make you more efficient. If you're constantly going up to the menu, that uses a lot more time. Now luckily when you do use the menu, you will also see your options available here for your keyboard shortcuts. And this little shape right here, that's your Command key, and this one here is your Option key, and then this here is your Shift key. Something that I forgot to mention too, with your guides, you can actually lock your guides, and by doing that, then you can no longer change the position. So if I have them set normally, then you can move them to wherever you want. And let's turn our snap to grid back on. So we'll snap to grid. So I can still move these wherever I want. But if we go back in here, and we lock our guides, then we no longer have the option to try and move them. And that's generally a good idea when you're working in something like this. Once you have your guides set, then you want to lock them in place. But that does still let you come and create a new guideline. Now, one other's it's kind of a, not so much a zoom option, but you can change the view of your objects to outline mode. So if you're finding things are moving too slow, or you need to be able to see the outlines of objects more readily through each other, then you can go Command 3 and switch to outline mode, or you can go up to View and you can turn it off and on there. Now I'm just going to zoom in real close here. I want to show you another little option here. So let's actually shift this over a little bit. So if you're trying to get an idea of what this might look like when you switch or export to bitmap and were to try and print it out or something, or expand it, then you can go up to View and you can go Show Pixels. So that's going to be what it'll look like if you were to change it to a bitmap and then try and expand it too much. So that can be a useful tool. And then to toggle it back off, we can go Option Command P. And we'll zoom back out. Now you see we've got these rulers here. Now if these aren't showing up for you, you can turn them on by going to your View menu. And this here will toggle your rulers, so if we hit that now, it'll hide them. If we want to bring them back, then just Command R. Now, one thing that I meant to show you here when you're working with your alignment panel, if you've got a number of objects and you want to distribute them evenly, they don't have an option on the actual panel to do that, but I just want to touch on it here. So let's just make a few copies of this. So if I want to distribute these evenly, then I can just select them all, get rid of that square there, and they're already currently aligned properly. So if we go up to our Arrange menu, and we can go to Distribute, and then horizontally. Now, unfortunately, there's no keyboard shortcut for this, and there's no option on this panel to do that. And then the other option you have on this panel is grouping or ungrouping objects, which you can also do with Control G. So we can go up here and we can group them. That way when you select one, you select them all. And you can ungroup them there. Or to toggle them back off, you go Shift Command G. And that will ungroup them again. So for your keyboard shortcuts, you can Command G to group. And then if you want to ungroup them, it's Shift Command G. And now they're ungrouped again. Now the other thing I want to talk about real quick is what are called smart guides, which are currently turned on. So what a smart guide does is if you come down, and let's actually turn off Snap to Grid. So when you get near an object, you see that little orange line shows up. That's telling you that you're aligned to the other object. Now, if you've got multiple objects that are kind of near each other, then that is going to show up as you align to other objects. And because this object is the same size, you'll notice that there's actually 3 orange lines indicating that you're lined up in the middle and the bottom as well. So where that line shows up is telling you exactly where your alignment is happening. So if I was to take this one and change the size, so now it'll tell me with that orange line that I'm aligned to the top. That'll show me I'm aligned to the top of the circle. Now it shows me that I'm centered. And now it shows that I'm aligned at the bottom of the circle. So I just want to touch real quick again on keyboard shortcuts for your guides. So if we want to hide our guides, it's Command semicolon. To bring them back, we just hit it again, that toggles it. If we want to lock our guides, or if we want to toggle locking of our guides, then it's Shift Command semicolon. And to clear our guides, you've got 2 different options. If you want to clear them all at once, you can go up to your View menu, down to Guides, and then Clear Guides. Now you can't undo that. Well, you could with the Command Z, I think, but best just to use Hide Guides. Now another way to clear a guide, if you want to just get rid of one of them, is you can just drag it off to the ruler. And then if we want to view full screen, we can just hit Control Command F, and that switches us to full screen mode. Now I want to mention one final thing about your grid here. You want to make sure that if you're going to export your file, that you turn that grid off first before exporting it. Otherwise, it will export the grid as well. I've cost myself a lot of time by forgetting to do that in the past. So that's the end of chapter 1 of this tutorial. So chapter 2 is going to be an introduction to the tool ribbon, which is all these tools in here. We'll go through each and every one of them, how to use them, and the keyboard shortcuts for them. Thank you for coming to our first chapter of our masterclass series on graphic for macOS, and we'll see you on the next one.